From the city of Peaky Blinders, Birmingham, England, I would like to introduce you to Paddy Dhanda.
As the world becomes more automated and the robots take over, being an effective product thinker still requires that human touch. Join me in a mission to champion human skills to help product teams boost creativity, enhance collaboration, and communicate with clarity. So pull up a chair, grab a samosa or two, and make yourself very uncomfortable. Dear friend, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Paddy Dhanda, and on today's show, I have a really good friend of mine, somebody who used to work with me. He's super ahead of the game when it comes to AI and technology. I have John Gordon on the show today, and I'm going to let John introduce himself because, John, you've been up to some really cool stuff after you and I kind of departed ways from our previous organization. So tell us a bit about what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Paddy. And it's been too long. It's been too long, my friends. I'm going to start a little bit at the beginning. So, as you can probably tell from my accent, originally I'm from Scotland. So hopefully we don't need to put in some translation into this episode. But if we kind of speak about my career, I started my career quite a long time ago in the military. So originally I worked in the Air Force for about 10 years, doing loads of different things, but mainly in air traffic control and search and rescue. And then about the time of London Olympics, I kind of fell into a software engineering project really by chance. And at that point, I got the absolute bug for writing code and decided to go and start something new and left the military. I started a degree with Open University to start to learn a little bit about code, and then ultimately left and worked for big SIs. So Capgemini first, then Atos, and then finally done a short consultancy gig with IBM. And then I came and met you. So like the next bit of my career, I joined a wonderful company called QA, and I done a whole bunch of jobs there. But ultimately, the final bit of a job I done was really looking at the technical portfolios. So I kind of looked over software, cloud, and originally a little bit of data, and really I was looking at it from a kind of pre-sales point of view. So really kind of looking at products, building products, and helping and launching products. And then kind of by chance, me and Stuart Martin, who was the CRO of QA at the time, both our kind of careers at QA kind of came to a close at a similar time, and we decided to do a startup. So we've been doing that for the last year, about helping sales and marketing processes go faster with AI. And it has been an absolute whirlwind, and kind of being in a startup and doing everything from taking the bins out to actually building solutions for customers. It's been unbelievably fun.
Oh, amazing. And look, John, I've been sort of catching up with you now and again just to see how things are. And it sounds like you really sort of went into that startup at the right time. It was just as things were starting to explode with AI. And I know you recently were at a conference, and I've been to quite a few recently. Now, I don't know how it was for you in your conference, but generally, I hear a lot of people claiming that they know about AI, but they've never built anything with it. They've read some books or they've seen a few videos. They've messed around with ChatGPT. You're one of the few people that really knows this stuff because you build this stuff, for a living, and you're always showing me cool stuff that you've done. But like, what's your experience of what you're seeing out there? Is it overhyped, all these people that are talking about it, or can it do amazing things as they claim?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I recently done the IRM UK. So I think it's one of the bigger BA conferences with my colleague Ian, who is also presenting. And it was super interesting to kind of see people that are building products that are customer facing and kind of where they are in their AI journey. So during our talk, we just asked people generally how many people had built agents. And I was really surprised to see that it was a very small number of people. So where we kind of presented, and I'm going to take us through a little bit of it today, was saying like this kind of life cycle of people understanding how to work with LLMs, And generally, even after like 2.5 years where they've been fairly mainstream, still people are just using it for kind of general prompting that's very unstructured. And when you start to kind of move down the next kind of cycles of having prompt libraries across teams and then starting to control what you're putting into the context windows and then starting to work with different tools to solve particular problems, and then really quite quickly you can build real kind of digital agents that can help you solve problems. So like in our kind of day-to-day workflows in our jobs, we've got a number of digital employees that we would have that helps us do specific jobs. So I think that's kind of where we're starting to see, but I think we're still really early in the cycle, particularly with non-technical people, of making these skills ultimately accessible, because it seems that a lot of people are intimidated. But just what you said there is, after you've got some of that core skills, you can build incredible products really quickly.
And as we were kicking off, as we were off air, you mentioned something that really stuck with me. You said, as product people, business analysts, it's actually probably more important that you get a grasp of writing really great requirements rather than actually building stuff anymore, right? So there's a real shift happening. Why is that? Why do you think it's really important that you master the art of writing requirements?
Because I think the real technical skills of writing in code are coming increasingly accessible. So I think the people that will thrive in the market will be people that can work with customers, understand the requirements, document that requirements, and then increasingly what you'll see is a lot of these platforms will write the code. Now, like I think at the moment still to write production grade code, it's still quite far away from that. So if you're using Claude Code or Codex or Gemini CLI, some of the kind of heavy hitters or tools like Cursor or OneServe, they can increasingly take requirements and build fairly complex systems. So the kind of next barrier to kind of break is, how do they do that with high quality, where enterprise can trust the code that's getting deployed? So I kind of start to see the software engineer job changing slightly, where I think BAs and product people will ultimately be people that are going to be building requirements. And I see the kind of sign off process. So like in GitHub, where you used to do these pull requests and go through them, I see that being more the job of the software engineer to kind of give the kind of quality and reassurance from the product people when they're building stuff, to be the kind of next major kind of thing within the enterprise.
Oh, amazing. And just in terms of terminology, I hear a lot of people use, AI agents, agentic AI, all this good stuff. Could you just break that down for us, just for anyone out there who's a bit confused about, what do you actually mean by an AI agent?
I think it's the most overhyped word. So if you kind of think about the kind of typical things that you've been doing with AI over the last couple of years, so typically you ask an LLM a question and it solves a particular problem for you. And then what you've kind of had in the past is you've had these tools that can help you build workflows. So if you came across Zapier or Make.com or any of these kind of workflow kind of type processes, and really what an AI agent is starting to kind of bring the both of them together. So it's taking an AI, so something like ChatGPT that you would use for, but not just asking it a question, but also giving it some tools so it can help to solve a problem. So for example, you could have an agent that helps you write a proposal. So inside that ChatGPT, you're going to say, can you help me write a proposal? And you've got access to a Canva tool, or a tool that helps you write the copy, or the tool that helps you put it into PowerPoint. And then basically, it's all that in a big loop. So for anyone, it's a little bit of code, if you think of what a while loop is. But basically, the agent just keeps on using that tools and working within the context window when asking the question until it solves the problem. So that's really all what agent is. It's just like a tool, and the LLM basically kind of working to solve a problem. And that's kind of what an agent is.
Oh, brilliant. And I know you're going to do some demoing today. So, folks, if you are listening to this on audio only, it might be worth watching this bit back, because we are going to go a little bit visual. So I'm just going to give John the stage. So you're gonna walk us through some real world examples of how you can use this technology.
Yeah, and the thing that I want to kind of cover is this kind of buzzword that everyone's talking about at the moment. So the kind of, if we were talking 6 months ago, a year ago, everyone was saying the biggest and hottest skill was prompt engineer. And you saw like some people in some organizations getting upwards of 200K just for writing prompts. But now what is kind of the new buzzword, and I think it's actually an important buzzword, is this idea of context engineering. So the term was coined by Andre Karpathy. So Andre Karpathy, for those of you who have not come across him, he has got the most amazing YouTube for making AI accessible. But anyway, he was one of the kind of lead brains behind ChatGPT. He was also one of the lead brains behind Tesla AI. And he's kind of said that this context engineering is the kind of hottest skill to learn over the next 18 months. And just before I go to the demo, all it really is, so the kind of key term to think about here is the idea of the context window. So what the context window is where you're asking the LLM the kind of question. So if you're using ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Claude, the context window is where you're asking that question. And basically all context engineering is really structuring in a really kind of formulaic way of the information that you're going to put into that and the tools that you're going to put into that. So when you start to kind of think about it like a product person, like a BA, like a kind of person that's working with a customer in a formulaic way, you start getting really great answers for the LLM, and most importantly, stuff that doesn't hallucinate or hallucinates much less. So like what we're just going to go through is a little app that I built. And the idea of this app is an app that was built entirely from requirements. So I didn't write any code on it. And the app, the whole purpose of it is to kind of show how we can use context and build context and put it into an automated workflow to solve some product processes.
Oh, awesome. Right. I can't wait. I'm going to hand over the power to you and sit as an observer because I can't wait for this.
Basically what this app here, so this app has been entirely built with no code. So it uses this framework, and I was kind of talking to Paddy about this framework before the kind of before we started, and it's around this idea of a product requirement prompt. So any kind of the product people that are on the call and listening, you might have heard of a product requirement document. Well, this is basically the next iteration. So there's a really great guy on YouTube called Cole Meaden, that maybe Paddy can put in the show notes, who's kind of developed this framework. But essentially what it was a way of taking specs and requirements and kind of building them in a quality way. So this is like a really quick aside, but this whole application has been built using that framework. So basically each spec that I went through one at a time, I described the spec, and then used that framework to build it. And the really cool thing it's that comes about with that is that it builds it in a more structured way. So it's got unit tests, it's got integration tests, it's got CI/CD pipelines and that type of stuff. So it's super interesting on the things that you can solve with these particular products. So anyway, as I kind of said before, as took that aside, the whole thing is around putting information into the context window. So this is an app that me and the Cello team built, and the whole purpose of this is to kind of build stuff that we're going to put into the context window to try and reduce hallucinations. So basically I've got this number of hubs down the left-hand side that do different bits of functionality. So the first one is the idea of the context. So what is the kind of context? So these are kind of the reusable building blocks of short bits of information that you could use again and again. So think of that might be client information, it might be product information, it could be competitor information. So basically information that we can store something and we can reuse again and again. So for example, when I'm kind of having a sales call and using my Fireflies note taker or my Otter note taker, when I kind of build that kind of context, I save that into my library, then I can reuse that in the prompt window. So like if you just look at this here, so this would be some examples. So here it describes an expense management system. So that's a bit of context. Here, this kind of speaks about some regulatory requirements for the UK. And basically what you can think of from a product point of view, these are kind of the reusable building blocks that we can combine with a prompt to solve a particular problem. So let's bring this a little bit more to life. So the next thing I've got up here is the prompt library. So what is a prompt? So the prompt is basically the instructions that you tell the language model to help solve a problem. So if we can combine those two things, the prompt and the context, then we can start to build really powerful kind of workflows inside our LLMs to solve problems again and again. So basically here, what we've just got is a prompt library. So the first prompt helps us build requirements documents. The second one helps us kind of map stakeholders. The next one is a process analyst expert. So it goes through a business process and gives you tips and pointers. One, it helps us write user stories, and then one, it helps us build business cases. But really, the kind of core thing to take away here is around building this kind of prompt library to help us solve particular problems. So if I just kind of click on maybe the requirements document one. So this kind of describes what the prompt does. So if we just kind of quickly click on the prompt, we've got the role and purpose. So it's like you're a BA and you're going to build this requirements document. It's got the instructions. It's got the specifics. It's got how I want the output to be. It's got some examples of some requirements inside the requirements doc. And then really key at the end, it's got this context part. So that's the part where we're going to put these building blocks. So if you think about it as Russian dolls, so the prompts may be the outer Russian doll, and then the kind of context are the inner Russian dolls, and then we can kind of build them up to help solve problems. So if I go into the next one and click next, basically what I've got now is all the different contexts that I can add. So this is just like the context that you saw before, but what then I can do is I can add and combine them to a prompt. So basically what I'm going to be creating now is not just a prompt, but is the individual context. So for this library, for example, as I said before, I've got context on customers, I've got context on products, I've got, well, I actually have got anyone in that one at the moment. I've got some in these different categories anyway. And the kind of key thing is it just kind of builds this kind of our prompt up to help us solve a problem. And then I also what I've got in this particular app is just something that could add some custom context. So maybe no peer post commentary. Because when you're using these LLMs, and it kind of speaks all the bit at the start and it speaks all the bit at the end that you never actually want. So we've just added it then. So here is kind of the kind of key part. So now what you can see is that we've got this base prompt. So this was the prompt before. But what's really interesting is also combine this with the context. So the kind of key thing of the kind of skills that we're trying to build, I believe, in the next 6 to 12 months is really doubling down the stuff that you're putting into the LM, because that like that kind of old adage of garbage in, garbage out really is true with these things. And this is just like a framework that you can use to help solve the problems. Does that make sense, Pad, before I kind of go into the next stage?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so this hub you mentioned has been built entirely without writing any code. And
yeah,
so this is something that you've created, I'm guessing, in terms
yep.
of the options, the sort of the main features you've got there listed on the left-hand side. And in terms of then the rationale for why you've got things like the context, why you've got the different sort of prompts as well, that's come from this framework you mentioned, the PRP framework?
Yeah, so they're kind of separate things. Sorry, so I probably should have said that at the front. So the PRP framework is just something I just wanted to give a little shout out to the start. So the PRP framework is help me build this overall application. So we could use that PRP framework for building any application. And as I said, Cole Meaden's one of the thought leaders in this space and is really interesting. Where the kind of context and prompt libraries is just what we're actually doing inside the application. So it's more the application requirements and just thinking about, as I said before, this context engineering being such a key skill. This kind of app has just helped to demonstrate that. So the final thing then, Paddy, or the next thing to go through is how we kind of combine this to solve a particular problem. So what we're actually going to do now is we're going to take the prompt and the context, and we're going to build it and run it through a workflow to actually go and build that requirements document out and send it via email. So if anyone's not come across this tool before, it is my favorite tool in the entire world. So it's a tool called NAN. There's lots of these in the market. So these are these kind of low code workflow automation tools where you can build agents and you can build workflows. And really why they're great for BAs and product people, they're very similar to what you would kind of see in business process modeling and notation and that type of stuff. But really kind of what you do is you build the workflow out end to end. And this is a simple one to chat through today. But the really cool thing is that these link to all your main enterprise systems. So if you were working with HubSpot, it's got HubSpot integration. If you're working with Monday.com, it's got Monday.com integration. And if, as long as it's got an API, you can work with the HTTP request. So for example, I've got workflows that goes and build things in Canva to kind of build the slide deck, and then it'll go and call HeyGen to build the video, then it'll send it to Descript to go and build and edit that video. So what you can start to do is put these things together into workflows to solve fairly complex problems. So I'm just going to go back to my app, and basically I'm going to go to this automation hub this time. And basically what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to send in the prompt that we had before and the context that we've had before to help us build and solve a problem. So I've created the automation, and just what this simple automation does is basically it takes the information, so the prompt and the context, it extracts all the data, it calls OpenAI to go and create the requirements document, then it calls Google Docs and creates the requirements document, then updates and adds some formatting to make it look nice, then it calls Google Drive and makes it accessible to the team, and then finally, we give the email, an email address to the automation at the start, and then it actually sends that requirement out. So I'm just going to press execute workflow so we can kind of see it running. I'm going to go back to my automation hub, and I'm going to run this automation. So I've created an automation. I'm going to go to John at Cello.ai. So that's me. So if anyone wants to reach out after this to kind of go through any of this, I'm more than happy to do it. Then I'm going to pick my requirements document prompt, and I'm going to select some same context like before. So I'm going to click the expense management system, and then we'll pass in this context and this context. So the really key thing is what this is going to do now, it's going to call that that automation with all the information. So basically this is just JSON, but as I said, this particular app just extracts that all away. But when I click run automation, what we can see in the back end now is that first of all, it's extracted the data. And now it's going to take a little bit of time, but this is where it's calling OpenAI in its own context window. And it's saying, OpenAI, can you create me a requirements document about an expense management system that's got that regulation and it's got that context that we spoke about before? So at the moment, that's kind of that's happening. So that'll take 10 to 20 seconds, hopefully not too much longer.
And so that's creating a requirements spec based on, as you mentioned, that context. So these aren't requirements that have been provided by anyone just yet, but it's sort of saying, based on this scenario, these are some good requirements that you might want to include. Is that correct?
Exactly right. And if we were going to be sending, for example, a proposal document, so you select your proposal prompt, and then maybe you've got a list of contexts of your different customers. So say you've got, I don't know, Atos, Capgemini, and IBM, who I used to work for. So maybe you select the Atos customer, and let's say you've got product A, B, and C, and you want to go and sell Atos product B. So you could select the product B, and let's say you've got pricing strategy X, Y, and Z. So then you could say pricing strategy X, and then when you could run that, it would go and build that proposal document for Atos using product A and pricing strategy X, if that makes sense, Paddy.
Yep, got it. Awesome.
So what happened? So if anyone could hear in the background, my email pinged off, and basically what I kind of got here is this automated document. So if I just download that document, and then I open it up. So here you can see what this has done. It's built the kind of expense management report system requirements document. So it's took that context in that I've gave it, and then when it's went to build the requirements document, it used that context. So this context that I just built before were just some mocks just for some fun, but it's built the functional requirements, it's built the non-functional requirements, and that was all based upon the system prompt. So the key things that went into this workflow was the prompt that went in at the start, the context, and then it called this workflow engine then to go and build this document. And this is a really simple workflow, but you could have this whole kind of complicated thing to build videos, to integrate with your CRM product, to integrate with your kind of product planning. So one of the ones that I use most often is when I'm building user stories, I kind of do it all in one go. So when I'm doing my discovery with the customer, I save that all as context, and then I create a prompt for creating user stories. Then I combine the user stories prompt with the different sessions that I've had with the customer, and that's all I have to do. So then I kind of, in the workflow I would have for that, I would have extract the data, call the LLM to go and build the user story. And then here I would have Monday.com, for example, that I use quite a lot. Then I put the stories all into Monday.com. So what it just saves me so much time, then I can just go and read through the kind of stories in Monday and see if how correct they are, make some final edits. So if it's saving me like 8 hours, however long it takes me to build a product backlog, it means I can really double down and concentrate on making sure that the stories are high quality right at the end, if that makes sense, Pad.
Yeah, and what that's really sort of showing me from an outsider perspective is you're actually spending more effort on making sure the conversation that you're having with the client is really high quality, because you're not worrying about, well, I've got to go off and type all of these stories out, I've got to structure them. Whereas I think in the old world, or maybe even the current world, a lot of us, we spend way too much time on refining those stories and getting the language right and structuring the stuff that actually we don't spend that time where it's really needed. And that's, that upfront thinking, that discovery work, as you mentioned, and asking some really great questions so that you're bringing in the right information. Yeah, that's phenomenal. Like, just looking at that and how you're you're really cutting out the admin type of stuff, the boring stuff, and just getting that to be automated. The context is really important. I think that you've just demonstrated there, like by having context, it really helps the AI, right? Because what's the danger if you didn't have some of that context in there? Like, have you tried it without that, and then have you compared the results? Well, what's been the difference?
Yeah, so if you don't get the right stuff in the kind of context window, the AI will just hallucinate and typically make things up. So there's different ways that you can add more stuff into the context window. So that's kind of a simple example. We could also give it custom tools, kind of similar to what we've done on N8N, that we could use special databases to kind of help get the kind of answers and have more structured answers. If you've heard about RAG databases in the kind of past, they can help us get better answers as well. But if I would encourage people, if you're not really thinking what you're putting into the context window, it's garbage in, garbage out. And if you ask for a generic requirements document that's not tailored to a specific customer, it's just going to go and make it up. LMs are very good at making stuff up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm finding that a lot, and I'm sure many other people are as well. So you mentioned a bunch of tools there, okay? And because I've been talking to you offline a lot, you've introduced me to a few of these, and I've been having a play. I was saying just before we kicked off, I was playing with Replit, which is a really cool tool for anyone who's thinking of just having a go and trying to experiment and build something really quickly, without any knowledge of coding, which is absolutely amazing. And then you mentioned the workflow tools there, N8N. And then the other one is make.com, and that's one that I've been using on and off. I've actually created an automation following one of our conversations just to do a simple workflow for taking a bunch of RSS feeds, so blogs and websites that I really value, and then looking to see what new articles have been posted over a period of time, and then just literally putting those into a simple email so that I can then start to build a newsletter off the back of that and curate some information. So that's been super cool. For anyone out there who is thinking, you know what, I really need to get into this. This is really cool, and but I don't know where to start. How do I start? What's the advice? What can they do? Are there people they can follow? You mentioned a bunch of YouTubers. Like what would you recommend?
Yeah, so I suppose the first thing would be is not like kind of get lost in doing loads and loads of different research. There's so many great tools on the market now, and make.com versus N8N versus Zapier versus Relevance. Quite quickly, you can get lost in them. what I would suggest that you do is think about something that's really annoying you in your day-to-day work. So like think about something that you don't enjoy doing, something that wastes a whole bunch of time, and then think to yourself, well, let's go and build an automation to go and build it. Ones that I like are Make.com and NAN, really good ones. But whatever one that you go into, just go and say whatever that problem is in YouTube, and then automation at the end of it. And then the kind of training now in YouTube is absolutely phenomenal. So there's a whole bunch of different YouTubers that I personally follow. So there's one called Ben AI, who's really good if you're in marketing. So kind of Ben AI kind of takes you through how to build end-to-end marketing processes. There's one called the AA Accelerator, so not Alcohol Anonymous, but it's AI Agency Accelerator, which is really good by this chap called Liam. There's a whole bunch of them out there, but basically what I would suggest is like first just go and build an automation, get something that helps you kind of save some time, and then after that, then you can go and work out the tool that's best for you and stuff like that. And there's just so much great training in the market.
Yeah, oh, amazing. And what really strikes me is a lot of these YouTubers, they're really young and they're just having a play and they're creating this crazy stuff. Like, I think for a lot of like older people like me, dinosaurs like me, we are sometimes held back because we think, oh, it looks a bit complicated. There's a steep learning curve, or we just haven't seen the value of it just yet. And it's a really interesting kind of mindset shift. That young generation seem to be really embracing these tools and just going for it, getting their hands on and hands dirty with it. You mentioned at a recent conference, you asked a room full of BAs how many of them have ever built an AI agent, and how many hands went up?
One-ish. So I think there's about 100 odd people in the room. And like it was basically zero, except one person said, oh, I've kind of played about with one.
Mm,
So basically nobody.
right, right. And look, well, I remember at the start of the year, I was trying to read up on what are the trends for this year, and the number one thing that everybody kept talking about was AI agents. Like, 2025 is going to be the year of AI agents. And before I knew it, I think there was the platform, is it Manus AI,
Yeah.
the crazy AI agent platform that came out, and it just blew my mind. And all of a sudden, we're seeing lots of organizations now, a lot of startups, sort of really advocating this approach. And I just think if you blink, you're going to miss it, right? Like it's going so fast. Yeah. How do you stay up to date?
I think it's like the hardest thing to do. So I think that's one of the hardest things, and like working with Acelo and with our amazing team, like we're just always having to like kind of read and research, and things are changing all the time. So even within our business, with automations that we built 6 to 8 months ago, now are all like automatically integrated into a lot of them to ChatGPT and stuff like that. So I think kind of biggest learning lesson that we've had is to kind of think about, well, go back to the business process. And like that's what was Stuart would always kind of be saying, who's our CEO. He'd be like, well, let's think about the business process first and think about fixing the process holistically. And when you start to think about kind of more complex processes and business and humans and kind of just not the AI doesn't solve everything. Like it's good after there's a clearly defined process where you can kind of work out some of the kind of key levers, and AI can help in there. But I think that could be a useful way to typically think about it and maybe get some gains.
Yeah. And I remember I used to work for a big technology consulting company, one of the big names. I won't mention them. And we did a government project, and we were pretty much automating a whole bunch of activities. So once the end user comes onto a website, they put in some stuff, click a button, and then in the background we were running all of these rules and logic to route things to different areas and do all sorts of fancy voodoo. What was really interesting with that, and this is way before AI and as we know it today, about 80% of all of those requests finished up with a human intervention at the end of it, because we couldn't automate it. It was just too complex or too complicated. And I think what AI has done is it's kind of given that brain to those sort of orchestration engines, as they were called, to really now start to act on some of those sort of cases that weren't so easy to code, right? And where you had to make a decision, and by giving context and all of these things, it's just given it this brain. And I can see how that particular example will be so much easier now, right? Whereas we really struggled with that, and we had a team of consultants all trying to define all the rules, and half the time our stakeholders didn't know the rules either, because they had never encountered this stuff before. So it's really interesting how things are moving on. Well, and again, thank you so much for your time today. I'm loving the background. You've gone all professional on me in terms of the filming, so it's really good to see. You're putting me to shame now. I've got to probably change mine. But no, thank you so much. It's the end of another episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please do connect with me via LinkedIn and drop me a message and let me know your favorite takeaways from the episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Superpower School newsletter so that you can be notified of all future episodes. Simply visit the website www.superpowers.school. Thank you once again.